The morning sun spilled through the cafe windows like a warm apology, but it wasn't enough to soften the tension sitting heavily on the corner table. Arlen Whitford, a single dad who had mastered the art of pretending everything was fine, walked in carrying his 7-year-old daughter, Mabel's, backpack in one hand and a fragile sense of hope in the other. He just wanted a quiet breakfast, a moment to breathe, maybe enough calm to face another day of overdue bills and job rejections. But then he saw her, the woman sitting alone, shoulders trembling, eyes red as if she'd been silently breaking for hours. Her untouched coffee had gone cold, and every few seconds she pressed a hand to her chest like she was trying to keep her heart from falling apart entirely. Mabel tugged his sleeve and pointed, whispering something innocent yet painfully observant. "Daddy, she looks like she needs someone." And that was the moment everything began to change. That if you believe kindness and second chances still matter in this world, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts. Your support helps stories like this reach more people. Arlen hesitated for just a moment. He had been taught to mind his business, stay out of strangers' troubles, and keep moving. But Mabel's hopeful eyes and the quiet ache in the stranger's expression felt like a calling he couldn't ignore. So he approached gently, clearing his throat with a soft politeness, and asked if she would like company. The woman looked up, startled, mascara smudged as if even her tears were exhausted. She began to refuse, but halfway through the sentence, her voice cracked, and she nodded instead. Her name, she told him after a moment, was Corinne Vale. The name meant nothing to Arlen, who rarely kept up with the world beyond his own survival. To him, she was simply a woman who looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. He didn't ask her what was wrong. He didn't pry. He simply sat, Mabel beside him drawing shapes on a napkin, while Corinne tried to steady herself. After a long silence, she whispered that she had made a decision that morning, one that would change her entire life, and she wasn't sure if she was strong enough to live with it. Arlen didn't know what that meant, but he knew that kind of fear. He had felt it when his wife walked out 3 years ago, leaving him with a toddler, a mortgage, and a breaking heart. He had felt it when he lost his job 2 months ago in a downsizing move. He had felt it every night since. Corinne noticed the faded fray on Arlen's jacket sleeve, the shadows under his eyes, the patient way he soothed Mabel when she asked why the lady was sad. Something in his presence grounded her, not because he had answers, but because he wasn't pretending life was perfect. The sun rose a little higher outside, bathing the cafe in a soft glow that made the moment feel strangely suspended, as if the world had paused to witness two strangers sitting together because life had pushed them toward each other on purpose. Arlen finally asked if she had anyone she could talk to, and Corinne shook her head. For the past decade, she had built an empire, a company she had founded at 26, a corporation people admired yet feared. Her employees saw her as brilliant, unstoppable, maybe even intimidating. But success had become a cage made of gold and expectations. And earlier that morning, she had fired someone she trusted, someone who betrayed her. The decision had been justified, necessary, but it had broken a piece of her she didn't know how to repair. Her loneliness wasn't sudden. She had simply run out of places to hide from it. Arlen didn't judge. He simply listened. And that was something Corinne hadn't experienced in years. Someone listening because they cared, not because they had something to gain. Something softened in her expression. She noticed Mabel offering her the napkin drawing, a clumsy but heartfelt picture of 3 people sitting at a table under a smiling sun. Corinne's breath hitched, and she pressed the napkin to her heart. It was the kind of kindness that felt like a lifeline. Hours passed without them realizing. The cafe grew louder, then quieter again as the morning rush faded. Corinne found herself telling Arlen things she had never shared with anyone. How she had sacrificed friendships, holidays, relationships, all for a dream that no longer felt like it belonged to her. Arlen shared pieces of himself too. His fears about failing Mabel, his uncertainty about the future, his exhaustion from fighting battles no one else saw. Two strangers carrying different burdens, yet somehow walking the same emotional road. As noon approached, Corinne excused herself to take a call. When she stepped outside, a black SUV rolled up, and 2 assistants rushed toward her, carrying folders, phones, questions, and fires that needed putting out. Arlen glanced at the scene through the window, confused. Mabel simply sipped her juice and swung her feet, unaware that the woman they had comforted wasn't just anyone. Corinne returned moments later, apologizing for the interruption, but something about her demeanor had shifted. She was calmer, more centered. She looked at Arlen with a sincerity that made him pause. She confessed that she hadn't expected to meet anyone that morning. Certainly not a father and daughter who would sit with her without expecting anything in return. Her voice trembled as she said that their kindness had stopped her from making a decision she couldn't undo. It was only then that Arlen noticed the world around her. The security, the polished professionalism, the unmistakable signs of someone important. But he didn't understand the scale until Corinne hesitated, then admitted who she really was. Corinne Vale, the billionaire CEO of Valion Enterprises, a company Arlen had only heard mentioned in passing on the radio. He blinked slowly, stunned. Mabel gasped dramatically, which made Corinne laugh. A fragile but genuine sound. But what surprised Corinne most was that Arlen didn't treat her differently after learning the truth. He didn't sit straighter or grow nervous or start choosing his words more carefully. He simply nodded and said that being important didn't make her any less human. Corinne felt something warm bloom in her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't defined by her company or her success. She was just Corinne. When they stood to leave, Arlen assumed that was the end of it. A kind moment shared, a stranger helped, a day slightly brighter. But Corinne paused before getting into her SUV. She glanced back at him and asked, quietly, almost shyly, if she could see them again. The question surprised him. But when Mabel whispered that she liked this sad lady who smiles pretty, Arlen smiled and agreed. Days turned into weeks, and what began as a single morning in a cafe grew into something delicate and unexpected. Corinne found herself visiting more often, sometimes joining Arlen and Mabel at the park, sometimes just sharing coffee after long meetings. She learned how to laugh again. She learned how to breathe. Arlen found his strength returning, bit by bit, in her presence. She encouraged him through job interviews, offered guidance, but never in a way that felt like charity. She believed in him before he remembered how to believe in himself. One bright afternoon, Corinne made a decision, not as a CEO, but as a woman who had been saved by kindness. She offered Arlen a position at one of her subsidiary companies, something perfectly matched to his skills, something stable enough to change his and Mabel's lives. But Arlen hesitated, worried about accepting something he hadn't earned. Corinne assured him that he had earned more than he realized, through strength, character, and the simple courage to care about someone he didn't know that he accepted. Their lives grew intertwined, not fast, not dramatic, but steady, warm, and real. Mabel adored Corinne, and Corinne found herself caring more deeply than she expected. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between shared meals, small smiles, and conversations that lasted long into the evening, Arlen realized he wasn't alone anymore. And Corinne realized she had found something money could never buy. A second chance, a family she never knew she needed, a place where her heart could finally rest. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life.